Hello and welcome to the CDO magazine interview series. My name is John Filipek with SHI International. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Garrett Berntsen, Deputy Chief Data Officer at the State Department. How are you doing today, Garrett?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Good, good. Do you feel as though, from your particular position, you are trying to consistently teach old dogs new tricks, if you will? And hey, they are resting on that 30 years worth of experience. And I mean, just in right, what was that? A couple minutes, you were able to flip just my perspective, right? It's still data. It's just the
Yeah,
filters that you as a human are putting on said data, right? And it's the things that you're either allowing yourself to see or not, right? Love my daughter, but she's not done a single thing wrong since she's been born, right? And that's just
yeah,
because I'm her dad. So
yeah,
I guess how does that kind of relate in your world? Because I think part of the
yeah.
ask is not only going in to sometimes accomplish that impossible task, but part of said impossible task is actually getting the buy-in from maybe that 30-year veteran who's like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll give the data guy a crack at this problem because I haven't
Right.
been able to solve it with my gut for 30 years. So
Yeah,
go ahead and have at it, type of thing.
yeah. I think that's a good framing of the question. I mean, it does depend. I mean, State Department is a large organization. We have dozens of bureaus who do anything from give out visas all the way through making climate policy, right? So we have a huge organization, and there are. I'd be remiss not to say there are existing centers of analytical excellence in multiple bureaus where they are fighting this fight, and they are delivering analysis for decision makers on key issues already. And we want more of that. We're trying to
Gotcha.
spread more of that out there. And I can talk about some of the initiatives we're doing about that in a second. But I'd also say this is a priority for the president. He's put out executive orders on modernizing diplomacy and the workforce. Our secretary, who has what's called a modernization agenda, that is been discussed publicly, and he came and talking about signaling importance of this issue to him and to the department. He came to our sort of campus, got a presentation from our team, talked about experiences he had in the private sector using data and analysis, and how that is important to him, and as we sort of modernize the department under his modernization agenda. The last deputy secretary for management and resources is named Brian McCune. He was a huge advocate for data and analysis. He signed a data strategy. So, these are really important sort of signals that executives are sending, sort of from the top down, right? But you can't change the culture just from the top down. It's a huge organization. We've also seen from the bottom up a groundswell of really smart, enterprising people, whether they're in Djibouti or they're back here in the United States, because we have people everywhere doing analysis on their own, finding a way, whether it's in Excel or finding tools that they can get their hands on. And in a great example of this, we put out a call last year for something we call data awards program. It was totally just like kind of an idea. I wonder if people will submit, for data awards. We got like 118 submissions from around the
Wow.
world of people doing, one-off. Hey, I
Hmm.
analyzed this data on public health issues in Mozambique, or I did a large model on some sort of data in a management area. Total surprise to us that we would get that many, and it really signaled that people in the department have a hunger to do this work and to be more analytical in both management and the foreign policy side. So I think we're super lucky that we have top down support and a groundswell sort of from the bottom up. And yeah, there will always be those all over the department who say certain things. Hey, that's not how I'm used to doing it, or I don't think
Sure.
it's useful here. But I think, over time, you win people over by providing impact for them, uh, um, solving problems for people who are maybe doubters, is a really good way to turn a doubter into an advocate. And as the department's workforce matures too, I think more people just have different experiences, are more digitally literate, and the culture kind of changes over time.
Yeah, and I think to your point, hitting it almost from both angles just shows, I think, where we're at as a country, as a workforce, just in general, right? Like the people coming out of school, like I never took a data literacy class in college, and I know that
Yeah,
there are plenty of individuals who are not only
yeah,
taking those classes, they're taking 201, 301 level stuff so that they can come out right into the workforce. I feel as though, maybe one of the stigmas that has long been kind of hovering over the federal just workforce is it is an old dogs game, right? It is very much so,
mm,
the good old boys club, if you will. And in order to get in, you have to know somebody to stay in, and that's completely changing in at least the few years that I've now been supporting. And some of the dramatic changes I'm seeing just across the board. Back to your point of retaining the talent that walks through the door, right? And it's investing back into them so that they can now execute on the framework and the vision and the dreams that you guys have, all while tackling, right, some of the most intricate, and diverse problems that you may come across in your line of work. That should always be attractive to top talent, right? Because if you're not
yeah,
getting better, you're at best staying still, which is allowing other people to go past you, type of thing.
yeah. And yeah, there are issues just in general with the federal workforce is, there's statistics on this. It is sort of, I think, older than it has been before. That's not necessarily bad. There's reasons for that. People are working longer. But I think there are a lot of great initiatives. We are a tiny sliver of this, but there's a lot of great initiatives across agencies at OPM to find pathways to get young people in with different skills to start their careers. And there is a lot of path dependency. If you get a job and you start that process, you have a clearance, and then you are have an ability to sort of work in government. And so those entry pathways are super important. We really, there are times we can make a decision between posting something publicly, which can take longer because people have to get clearances, or posting something inside of government. And we find a balance where we're trying to, even if it takes longer, that is worth the time and the investment for some of our roles. And I think everyone is kind of juggling that and trying to focus what they can on getting new people into government as well.
And you make that decision completely based off your gut, right? No, no analytic.
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
So, kind of to wrap us here, Garrett, I got one more formal question. Then, of course, I'll turn
sure.
the floor over to you just to talk a little bit, again, about some of the cool things that you guys are doing there on the state side. But the last piece around, again, the teams and the talent in the space and how you envision things going. What's your ideal makeup, of a team, right? Of course, you sitting on top of the organization, you both have, the charisma, the leadership qualities, but also the data qualities. But then that doesn't always make the best, soldiers, if you will, right? My parents always say one chief, bunch of little Indians, right? And they got to kind of get in line and carry out the orders, if you will, to make kind of everything go correctly. So I guess in your eyes,
Yeah.
right, as somebody who's leading such an innovative team, problem solvers, leaning into their creativity and their problem solving probably doesn't always lend itself to following orders exactly maybe how
Sure.
they're laid out, which is a
I
good
might,
thing.
yeah, I might push back a tiny bit, I guess, I'm a former Army officer. And I'll say, my squad leaders were incredibly independent operators often. And so I think from that experience, in a good way,
Yeah.
and I have taken that sort of to heart as any role I have been in, whether it's here or other places as well. And my boss has had similar experiences in other organizations. I think like we really want young leaders who are willing to own the work that they're doing. And we are a pretty flat team, and we really, the things that sometimes often take up all your time in government, I got to clear this paper, I got to do whatever, that is the stuff that I think we actually don't like doing the most. That is what we try to spend the least amount of our time on, and the more amount of our time on building things, solving problems, helping our team sort of solve problems as well. So I would say number one, what we need, and you can lead from any role, is what I was going to say. We need leaders, and those are people that can lead from anywhere. You can be the soldier, the private, writing code, doing engineering, but you can still lead in that role as a thought leader, as a technical expert, as a person who raises their hand when there's a problem and says, I'll tackle this issue. So I think we need leaders first of all, And then, then there are hard skills. There are technical skills that we must have just to do the work, and
Yep.
those cut across data science, design, engineering, security, data. But then we also have culture and training and communications and product management, and so we are very fortunate in that we have kind of a full suite of capabilities and skills needed across our team. And we try to do whatever we can to give people opportunities to grow if they want to move laterally, skills wise, or if they really want to stay hyper focused and become a true sort of technical expert in an area, they can kind of do that.
And that only lends itself to, right, the retention piece, I think, that you mentioned earlier, right? Like giving
Yeah.
them a couple of those goes within a flat organization, as you just mentioned, is definitely exciting. I think the thing that all of us are always looking to, get is more foundational industry knowledge, right? And the only way you get that, I think, is time on task. So that's awesome that you
Yep.
afford them, that opportunity. So that
Yeah.
was the last formal question I had on my end. What I'd really like to, do now, Garrett, is offer you the opportunity to maybe highlight one or two of the projects that you're working on that, are near and dear
Sure.
to you, and then we can close things down on our end.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to. I'll give like a couple examples. I think somewhat generic, sufficiently generic examples to share, and then I kind of want to end a little bit on a pitch for to your listeners, anyone out there for government service in sort of technology, and why I think it's like a kind of unique moment for that. So to start first with sort of the work we're doing, we have a portfolio that is split almost exactly like 50-50 across management problems and foreign policy problems. And on the management side, we are leading a global, where we are helping deliver global services to like 200 countries. And that requires IT services, logistics, airfare, anything you can imagine. We're running like a small global nation. And we have to, for medical services, all of the things you need to take care of people. And so that produces a tremendous amount of data, as you can imagine. And so leveraging modern data approaches and analysis, there's a ton of low hanging fruit to be more efficient, optimize, save money, and deliver kind of insight to management leaders who are trying to figure out, do we put an embassy here? Do we put an embassy there? How many people do we put here versus there? And there's a lot of data that informs that decision, like where your people are and how much space do you have? All of these sort of key management questions. So this harkens a little bit back to your question on the gut and the data. This is a perfect example. Look, we're not going to build a model that says one to end, this is where everybody goes. Politics matter. What the president cares about, what the secretary cares about, that helps inform strategy. And you can't boil that down to one to end, but you can bring the basics of that management data on these sort of specific management issues to those decision makers in an analytical way. And then people can, make those decisions with lots of other factors as a part of it. So that's sort of one bucket of our portfolio. The second is foreign policy, right? And on that, we support analyses on a lot of the major issues that the department and the country are dealing with globally. Things like climate change, and how are we addressing with our partners and allies globally on commitments to, climate, greenhouse gas reductions and stuff like that. That is a highly data-driven analytical question, and we help provide analyses to inform negotiations and discussions on those issues. Things like strategic competition with the PRC, key issue. There's lots of diplomatic questions and analysis that can use open source or that can use large volumes of data to do prediction and analysis around that issue. And then also a key priority for the secretary is multilateral diplomacy. And so we work in hundreds of multilateral organizations. The UN is obviously the biggest one that everybody kind of knows about, but there's tons of organizations that help manage multi-government decision-making processes around the future of the internet or human rights and stuff like that. So there's some interesting analytical questions around voting patterns and behavior in those organizations that we also support our decision-making leaders, with analysis on those questions. Those are some examples, hopefully, to sort of whet the appetite. And then the last thing I'll say, just as a pitch, if anyone's out there, listening to this, look, you said at the top, right? You said that there is a hungry workforce, or there's a lot of demand for these skills. That is true, but we're also in this kind of strange moment where there have been large tech layoffs in a lot of big companies that hired up through the pandemic. And I would just say, if you're a person who has been affected by that, there are opportunities to do this type of work and have a huge impact in government. State is an awesome organization, but there are tons of parts of this government, of this country, that need help, from the Bureau of Land Management or the Department of Transportation, who's about to invest billions of dollars in infrastructure, or Veterans Affairs. There's just a ton of tech work that is needed, and you can really make an impact by doing this work. It is not fast or easy to get in, and I know that is probably frustrating, but there are ways to do it, and I really encourage people to apply and to reach out to people in your network who maybe are in government, and try to look at opportunities and take them seriously.
Yeah, I will echo all of those sentiments as somebody who, of course, leans on, the federal government to live my day to day life. So, absolutely right, and I think that's such a unique and fresh perspective, even to look at the landscape of the job market right now, based on, of course, where we've been over the last couple of years, and now where hopefully we now take some of the mandates and the visions, as you mentioned, and strategies that are being pushed out, and kind of really make sure that we push our country forward appropriately by having the right people in those seats doing, like you said, not maybe the fun work, but certainly the hard and necessary work that is required in order to get us, I think, down
It
the
can be
path of
fun
that
too.
vision. Yeah, yeah,
It
sure,
can
sure.
be fun too, but I hear you. Yeah, you
Yes.
got it. That's why you have to be optimistic and resilient, because that's the only
Yep.
way to have fun while you're at it. But yeah, I hear you. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Garrett, for
for
joining
sure.
us today. Everybody
Yeah,
in the audience, please feel free to visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, and be on the lookout for the additional parts of this series here. Thank you so much, everybody. And Garrett, have a great day.
thanks. You too, John.